Hey there, grab a cup of coffee and join us in an entertaining and thoughtful conversation about parenting. We're tasting new coffee every episode and diving into a deep conversation about the inevitable speed bumps and seasons we'll encounter as we strive to be the most successful parents and spouses we can be. Welcome to Family Brew Podcast.
All right, Jamie, what are we tasting today?
We are trying Kalamazoo Coffee Company's maple bacon flavor. Actually, it's called There Ain't No Mistaken Maple Bacon. There ain't no mistaken
smells...
maple bacon.
I don't know. I don't smell much. What about you guys?
I think I got maple. I don't know about bacon.
I get like a burnt.
I think that's what they're going for because it says, enjoy this smoky treat, sweet smoky treat.
Yeah, but it's not like a nice smoke. It's like a burnt.
Oh,
Hopefully they still sponsor us.
I actually like it.
We'd be willing to try future flavors if you want to send us some.
I actually like it a lot. I think it subtly meets the flavor name, personally. If you added a little salt, maybe you'd actually get more
That's what I was
bacon.
hoping for. I thought it was going
officially.
to be sweet salty, but I don't know if salty coffee would work.
Salt coffee.
I don't know how you do that in a coffee. I mean, it's not bad. The more I drink it, the more I like it.
So I actually look at it. Let me word this right. Let me finish because it's going to sound weird. I think when you pick a spouse, it's almost like shopping in the Dent and Ding section in a furniture store because not that spouses are inanimate objects or that they aren't, people aren't valued more than stuff. But I feel like everybody's flawed, right? And so everybody comes through life and whatever they went through, they're going to come with these bruises and scars. And when you pick somebody, they're going to have some of those. And I think some of them you're going to notice right away, right? You may even notice when you're dating. I think there's other ones that you'll find along the way when you're living together after you're married. But we all have those. And I think, trying to pretend that we don't come into a marriage with that's silly.
So I think that for me and Jim, our baggage kind of brought us closer initially because we had similar baggage that, so it brought us closer. There was stuff we were dealing with even when we first met that we just were able to connect with and be shoulders for each other. And so initially that was a good thing. And then later on, after we got married super young, that baggage no longer was a good thing. It started to, instead of bringing us together, it started to kind of tear us apart a little more in how we were handling it.
Jimmy making a weird face.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what she's referencing as far as tearing us apart. I know things were difficult. Things are difficult to work through.
Maybe it wasn't the baggage necessarily itself, but the way you were handling it later and adjusting to the married life so young.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
If that makes sense.
A lot of that comes with a lack of maturity. When you get married at 20, 21,
I just remember, we were shoulders to cry on for each other with our problems from our childhood when we were dating. And then after we got married and, those normal marital struggles happened, especially as young kids, they became kind of weapons, if that makes sense. Like bringing up our past or the problems that we had a little bit more against each other instead of, and though you're right, it all goes back to being young.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's not how I remember it, but that's...
Why?
Well, I just don't remember taking anything from my past and using that as a weapon against you.
No.
Or vice versa.
No, like blaming problems that you had as an adult that you were able to take back to your childhood. Mm-hmm. Instead of, I'm so sorry about that and stuff, I would use it against you. Or you're just that way because of whatever. You're never going to change because of, things like that. Like the truths I knew about you became more of a, ammunition. Which I think, once again, is normal when you're not, we weren't founded on Christ yet at that point. So there was a lot of growth.
I don't remember a lot of that.
He's blocked it out.
Yeah. I repress those memories.
So do you feel like there's shortcomings or maybe stuff that you brought into the marriage that you didn't you don't even realize about yourself until you're partnered up with somebody, and then that kind of comes to light more? Or
I feel like it became more of an issue because now you have somebody to be accountable to. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, when you're on your own or you know, living at home with your parents, your finances are your finances. But when you're married and you want to go buy a new toy, and you have bills that are due, and you know,
This is not just a hypothetical example.
yeah.
he's all February 4th.
And then you have to answer for that, you know, and then it would cause problems and shame and whatever else comes along with it. So, yeah.
I think we're both really good at telling the other person where they weren't growing up the way they should have been, but we weren't good at looking at ourselves yet in that area.
I think I remember, like, when it was our first anniversary or something like that, we went to like a family reunion or something, and we mentioned like it had just been our first anniversary, and somebody said to us, "Oh, well, that's the hardest part. So you guys already made it past the hardest part." And I was like, "The first year is the hardest part?" Like, you always hear like, "Oh, it's the honeymoon stage, blah blah blah," but it kind of, I mean, I still kind of like see that as being true. Like, I don't know if it's the hardest part, but it was definitely difficult. Like, when you read the Bible and it talks about, you know, two become one, you think that that's just like an instantaneous thing, but it's not. It's definitely a process of two individual people learning how to be part of a unit, you know, and that's the beginning of your family coming together. Like, first you have to learn how to be a family to each other. Like, what does that mean? Like, that means I can't just only think about myself. I have to think about how all my decisions affect that other person, and it can't be, you know, you don't get to be selfish anymore. It doesn't work if you are. So you have to start to think as like a unit, and that takes time to get used to. I remember being resentful of that time and time again during our first year. Just like, why do I have to, like, everything I want to do now has to be like, how does that affect him? Why can't, like, you know, just
My self-esteem is
reconciling your different personalities. Like, I'm an introvert. I like to do things by myself. And Mark is not that way. He wants to do everything together. And so it was like, you know, I go to the store. Let's both go to the store. Let's both do this. And he's still that way. And so I've had to learn how to adjust myself. And then he also has had to learn how to let me have some space when I need it and stuff. So just reconciling our two personalities was definitely difficult that first year. Like, it's different when you're dating. You know, you're always on your best behavior and everything's hunky-dory. But when you're living together and everything is, you know, like you said, bank accounts come together and all this stuff you have to, like, combine. It's weird. And I went straight from my parents' house to being married and learning how to live with somebody else, and, like, bills and all the stuff that comes up with that and stuff. So it was just like a big life change all at once. So yeah, I felt like our first year was not as, I mean, I was thinking like, this is the honeymoon stage? Like,
I feel like you're making it like I downgraded into Mark's house with my parents.
That's not what I mean. It was definitely,
My suffering years began.
there was definitely an adjustment to that. And the fact that person said, well, that's like the hardest part, it kind of made me feel a little bit better about it, because I was like, okay, so it's okay that it was a hard adjustment. You know, it was okay that, like, it wasn't like the whole thing was all fun and games, and, you know, that's the beginning of your family starting, and it's just, yeah, it takes a lot of adjusting, I think.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying in those feelings that first year, but I wonder if it has to do with the more, usually, you know, you have in a couple, you have the introvert, the extrovert, the more independent, the more codependent. And I kind of wonder if that kind of has to do with that independence, because I was ready to go out in the world and do my own thing. Again, like Jamie, I came from home and got married and then jumped in this relationship, and suddenly I have to answer to my wife and answer to all these things. But I wanted to go out and do all of these things that I felt like, the world just opened up to me, and now I ended up getting locked down right away, thinking it was the best idea in the world. But so I can relate to a lot of that. There was just a lot of figuring that out in, different ways. But we made it.
We're still making it. I think that all those things are normal for going from 2 to 1. And then kind of back to the baggage question, though, it's how you cope with that is where the baggage issue comes in, I think, if that makes sense. Because if you had parents that you were able to see them communicate well and fix the issues, the differences well, it'd be easier for you to recognize and kind of handle those, even young and early in marriage. But I know for us, I think that's where it really put a hiccup for us. We didn't have parents that communicated well at all or reconciled things well at all, either one of us. And so you throw that we just didn't have that skill. And then getting married only after 9 months of knowing each other. I was 18. He, very much the same job at all. So now, you know what I mean? Bringing all those things together, that was kind of a mess. But so we've learned over the years, and I'm grateful that we've learned it now and had to grow together, but how to reconcile those things, how to give more grace, be more accountable, stop blaming all the time, things like that. A lot of steps. We're still practicing.
Yeah, I carried in some stuff that I didn't know I was carrying. I knew I had some sort of abandonment issues going on, and we'll get into that. We're going to have a whole series, probably a couple episodes on abandonment, and get deep into that. But I knew, my dad walked away when I was 4. He swiped right on his mistress and left our family, and so I was kind of wrestling through that. I had 3 other siblings wrestle through it. We all kind of, arrived in different spots after having gone through that. And I knew that I was something that I was carrying in. I didn't know what it was going to look like when we got married. I've done a bunch of research on it, and apparently it turns you into a people pleaser or a, what's the other one? People pleaser or a attention seeker. And I was both of those. I still remember Jamie tells the story like it's funny, but she went to the store one time. We were in our apartment, and she took off to the store, and I remember asking her, like, you're going to come back, right? Like, you're going to be back at some point, right? And she was like, what? I'm just going to the store. And so there were little things that, like, kind of came out that I didn't realize, like, how it was going to manifest in a marriage, and some things that I was walking in. But since this is a parenting podcast, so we're not going to just talk about marriage the entire time. And so if we're going to, like, shift it a little bit and talk about, what we're bringing to our family, what kind of baggage we're bringing to our family, and does that get passed down to our kids? Because that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. Like, is there things that are generationally, like, just, is there patterns? Is there things that are passed down we're not thinking of, whether good or bad? You tend to see family or patterns run in families, and I want to just share that a little bit and see what that looks like. Like, have you guys ever been conscious about what it is that our kids are getting from us?
Anger. I think that's the one I noticed the most, that I can think back to very easily in the in the past generations of women for me. Just this need to be, and I already know what you're going to say when I say this, so I am working on it, but the need to be in control. There was what's that matriarchal sense, like the women wore the pants in the family. And then somehow when it got to my mom, like, it switched because my dad had his own baggage that he brought in. So he wore the pants in the family, but didn't always do the best job with that. They just didn't connect super well. And I didn't have a great view of how to be a wife or be, or an example of a husband either. So it's odd. My mom, like, kind of lost that opportunity. And then it came down to me, and now I'm somewhere in the middle that I fight back and forth with on, so I have submission issues now, I would say. But so that's the baggage that comes to mind right away, generationally for me. So that I still struggle with. And my daughter, I'm trying to find that balance of raising her to be a strong woman, but submissive at the same time. We're having a lot of authority issues right now, and so trying to teach her to manage the emotions, to know what's right and wrong, to trust your intuition and discernment, but to be able to take a step back and look too. But she's only 7, so that's going to be a process we're going to be working on for a while.
It gets easier, right, as girls get older?
I'm
know
gonna.
about that.
I'm not gonna answer that now.
So, what would you say are some traits that you are passing down to your kids, whether they're purposeful or not? Do any of you guys have any sort of trends in your family, would you say, negative or positive?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say on the subject, but I figure I'll let you guys go first because I'll take over, I think.
Anybody have addiction run in their family? Or single parenthood? Is that a no? Everybody's looking at me. No?
I don't have the single parenthood one really. No.
No.
I mean, addiction. Yeah, So my family has struggled with addiction, and both my parents and my siblings. I don't know about single parenthood, but a total lack of communication has been like a hallmark of their relationship. And then, things like that, selfishness and those things. So kind of just looking at those things and looking at what were passed down when Anna and I got married, we came from families with two very different worldviews. One, my family specifically, was pretty financially well off, but it's, everything's a white picket fence outside, and then on the inside, it's difficult. I mean, that's putting it lightly. I don't want to disparage my family, but, it was close to an abusive childhood. So actually it was an abusive childhood, but, and Anna's family comes from a lot of, if I were to describe it, almost like abandonment, like being there, but not being there. Mm-hmm. And then, in that position. And so one comes from like nurturing. The other one's about how do I look in front of people? And, I don't know about nurturing so much as controlling. And the other one's about
like a survival mechanism
making
for
sure
me.
that we look good in front of people, regardless of whatever was really happening. And so there's a lot of that going on in my family, her family. And then at first, when we first got married, we were carrying both of those. Both of us we were bringing those to the table. At some point when we had children, I like to think that we've been pretty open, and not just open, but aware of what we were given, what was kind of lumped on us, and have really strived not to pass those things down to our children. So,
Do you mind if I cut in for a second? Sorry. I just was thinking, breaking chains. Remember, we used to always talk about that. These were about the chains we were going to break, right?
I got that in here, chain breakers.
Yeah, we wanted to break certain chains, but it hit me that sometimes we didn't know exactly what the chain was that needed to be broken specifically. We knew there was a problem, and we didn't want to do it, but we didn't know what the positive version of whatever said issue was, if that makes sense. So yeah, having kids definitely motivated us. Go ahead, sorry.
Did you guys consciously talk about that before you had kids? Like, hey, we got some chains that we are going to have to be the breakers of.
Yeah, and for me, it manifested in a very physical way. And growing up, excessively obese and severely overweight and out of shape, my whole family was basically that way. It was just the norm. It was about not taking care of yourself physically and eating as much as you could. And in a way, it's a coping mechanism, right? Mm-hmm. Like you get to comfort eat and keep yourself as comfortable as possible because of all the emotional and whatever traumas coming your way. But for me, that was very physical, and I knew when our son was born, our first son, I didn't want him to go through what I went through. So that was a huge motivating factor for me to start taking care of myself physically. And then with that came more emotional awareness to say, okay, I deal with this, and this physically. And it brought, sadness and shame and guilt and fear and all these other things. And I don't want them to feel that way ever about their body, regardless of what they're like. So while I want them to be healthy, I want to make sure that it's the health that we're focusing on and not just having this imagined ideal version, and that spills over into every other aspect of life too, not just the physical, right?
think a big one we wanted to do is communicate with our kids and communicate with each other, because that is a skill that we did not come into the marriage with, because back to what I said earlier, our families didn't communicate. There was grudges over here, lying over here. That it was just a mess. There was just no owning up to your own mistakes or anything. And so that was one thing that we tried to handle right away, was communicating with each other, and then with our kids, being honest with them is a big thing for us. Not just because I said so's and out of turn anyway, not berating them or making them feel like they're not worthy or any of those things. We, trying to understand, remember that they're children, and let them know that we love them and you can trust what I'm saying right now. Let's talk about this, not just you're punished, go away, and then you forget about it. And no lesson was learned, no love was made, no reconciliation, no repentance, so communication was another thing we wanted to be much better at.
So that's twofold, right? You talked about communicating with each other and then communicating to the kids. Do you ever communicate with each other in public so your kids can see that? Like, do you ever think about allowing, certain things they can't watch, right? They're not going to be able to see you talk about, important issues that they shouldn't know about yet or whatever. But do you ever think about letting them witness you guys communicating on some levels to see how it should work?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's always exactly conscious.
Yeah.
I do. I make a concerted effort to, maybe when we've had arguments, to discuss with them, what maybe not what we're arguing about, but that we're having an argument and that we can still talk about it like adults. And if we're angry, to be able to take a break and come back to it. And then especially when we...
So you'd be like, watch Daddy win this one. Yeah. I haven't won yet, but I'm due. Sorry, go ahead.
It's coming, guys. Trust me, this time. No, but, and especially I think the big one in my mind is admitting when you're wrong and apologizing, right? So I've done that several times where I said, I was wrong, Mom was right, and I'm saying sorry because I was wrong, and I want to make sure. And then more than that, like, we make it kind of an effort for her or me at the time, usually her, to say, I forgive you. So they know, like, hey, forgiveness is also an action that needs to be taken. It's not just something that's kind of assumed, So yeah, I like to think that we are pretty good about that, probably more often than not. We don't get into huge blowouts anymore. We used to, fairly often. Now it's probably, I think we're good for maybe 2 to 3 a year. And then I'm sleeping on the couch for a minute, and then we're good.
It's December. How many guys got left?
We should be good. We should be good for the next 3 weeks.
So, Jamie, you haven't done much talking. Is there any sort of chains you think in our families we're going to try to break?
Well, my personal baggage was related to, I had one parent, and like you said, Jim, not to disparage parents because none of them are perfect, and but I have one parent with a very, very short fuse, and it regularly left me, afraid to do or say almost anything in my own house. And then the other parent was kind of just standoffish and didn't intercede, didn't do anything about it, pretty much pretended it wasn't happening, I guess. So kind of that, I spent a lot of time as a kid being afraid that I was going to grow up and do the same things to my kids, just like having a short temper, lashing out, physically being abusive at times. And I was really, really worried about that. And so I remember even starting as a kid praying over and over, please, when I grow up, don't let me do this to my kids. Please, help me not to be that way with my kids, and help me to be more patient and all this. So, and I feel like, well, obviously not perfected yet, of course, but I feel like God really answered that prayer for me through my journey, like just the things that he put on my path kind of worked that out for me, like added patience and just helped me. I mean, for a lot of years, I worked with kids, not my own kids, other people's kids and stuff. So I think that built a lot of patience in me. And so anyway, I just felt like that was something I knew that was going to be an issue that I was going to possibly bring into the future. And I can still feel it, bubble under the surface sometimes. You feel like your kid does something and you just like, you feel like you just want to snap, but you can't let yourself do that. But so it's always, of course, a work in progress, and it's always going to be something I have to be aware of and think before I react to things and stuff like that, because I know what it felt like to be on the other end of that. And so I really try to measure my responses and make sure I'm being rational and all of that, so that it's not coming across the way it did to me as a kid, I guess. So, and also the whole being an advocate for your kid too. Like I feel really strongly about, like, anytime my kids, something happens to them, I feel like I want to stand up for them, like right away, like, don't be mean to my kid. And I even tell them, like a few times they've said something disparaging about themselves, and I'm like, don't talk about my kids like that. Like I tell them, then they're like confused, like, wait, I am your kid.
Talking to the third person about
yeah. I'm like, you don't say that about my kid. Like, well, and I use their names and stuff, but just wanting to stand up for them, be in their corner, and make sure that they know that I'm there for them, and that I'm not just going to pretend like something, bad's not happening to them, is important to me as well because of my own experience. So I feel like that's like kind of a good baggage, I guess, I'm bringing in, just kind of making sure that I do that, because I felt like I needed that and I didn't get that. So making sure I'm in their corner is really an important thing for me to do.
I'm trying to think of what baggage I brought into. I remember as an 8-year-old probably, telling myself that if I ever got married, I would not end that marriage in divorce. And I'm pretty sure I have 3 siblings, so there's 4 of us. I'm pretty sure we've all kind of said that at some point, I would hope. But yet you fast forward to now, and 2 of my siblings have been divorced, one of them twice. And so there are kind of like times where you feel like I'm going to break this pattern, and it just kind of cycles through. And I'm sure circumstances are different, but there are some things that just kind of filter down through families and keep happening. And I don't feel like, I guess I don't feel like there's going to be a ceremonial transfer. Like our kids are 18 and we're like, here's some road rage that I have. You take that with you and make sure you pack that. And I have animosity toward my father and take that with you too. And I'm terrible with money. I hope you carry that out. Like, I don't think that there's going to be some ceremonial transfer, but I do think that it doesn't hurt to be intentional and think about what you are handing down and what they are seeing. As far as with us as a couple, there were a few rocky times that I could think of that the kids didn't get to see because we were childless for like 11 years. And I think part of that's a positive, if I was honest, because we got to wrestle through some things first. But I remember like time was a weird thing we had never thought of. Like I was always early places. Jamie was always late, and that's kind of like a thing.
No, not always late. To you, on time is late. Okay,
and to her, on time is 30 minutes late.
No.
So, yeah.
No.
So that, anyways, that was something we had to wrestle through. Never thought about that until we both needed to show up to somewhere together at a certain time, and we realized that like, no matter what time she wakes up, we're still 30 minutes late.
We are not.
All right, we can cut that out. I just want to see what you would say.
Oh my gosh.
But that was mostly true. Anything else we should add to?
Yeah, I think what I really want to say here is that I think that baggage transfer, especially for us, considering as a group of people, not just us as a marriage, but us as a group of people here at this table, it's easier to focus on these kind of negative things. And baggage transfer has this negative connotation to it.
Just
right?
The word baggage sounds negative.
But then if you really think about it, like your kid gets all of those things from you, right? I would say the majority of them. There's always the world that influences them, but the majority of their personality they get from you as a set of parents and even as individuals. So if we were to focus on the good things, like I know both my kids, they're both kind, they're both strong, they're both very loving. They communicate very well. They're still learning, but they do for their age. I'm really happy with that. So those are all things that I'm sure that they've learned from just seeing us grow in and of itself. You know what I mean? So I guess for newer parents out there, I would want to tell them, like, hey, don't just beat up on yourself and think that you're this scratch and dent refrigerator that is going to pass that on to your kids. Like, you have a lot of great qualities that are going to go to them too, but it's important to focus on all of it and try and bring it to them,
Yeah. And I don't want to start an episode this way, but it probably feels more natural to end an episode this way. So we're four friends that have known each other for over a decade. We've been parenting for about the same, almost a decade. And we are not licensed therapists, right? We're not psychologists. We're just parents. And I just wanted to put that out there. This is not a podcast where you're going to listen to and try to come away with a 12-step program of how to become a better parent. A lot of the ideas and things we're going to share are just from experiences. They are not they're not prescriptions, and they're not even things that we get right all the time. And so if it comes across when we say something like, oh man, I wish I was like them, it seems like they got it all together. Like, we don't, and we're not even following our own prescriptions sometimes. But there was, as we researched podcasting, there was kind of this vacuum in the parenting section that wasn't being filled, and there wasn't anything that I could find that you could listen to and just hear from your peers, hear from people that have walked that road already. Some people are walking it right now. And I just wanted to put that out there that that's what this is. Hopefully you'll grab some coffee and just listen along, but this is not, I mean, it might be more like here's what not to do than here's what to do. But I just want to put that out there. This is not a professional advice seminar. This is just us having conversations about some tough things we're going to go through. And the reality is we've been having these conversations for years, but we just happened to hit record recently in the last few weeks. And if you look at our culture, like a lot of the breakdown and the negative things that are going on in the culture and in the human race now, you can, if you back up a little bit, you can attribute almost all of those to the breakdown of the family and the single parent households. And I know that there's reasons that create that sometimes that are unavoidable, but there's a lot of things you can trace back to just the breakdown of family issues. And so what we're going to try to do is be intentional as parents. We're not going to get it right all the time, but we're definitely going to have that be our focus of trying to be the best parents we can be.
Also, for just 12 easy payments of $59.99, you can have access to our 12-step program.
First 6 callers. Thank you for listening to the Family Brew podcast. Where can they find us at?
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And what should they do when they get there?
Follow us.
What else can they do when they get there, buddy?
They can suggest new coffee flavors and suggest new ideas for episodes and much more.
Sounds good.